IT has become more complex and dynamic than ever, generating enormous amounts of data from on-premises, cloud, and hybrid environments. Operations teams are overwhelmed, and it's impacting their ability to ensure service performance and availability. Moving from reactive to proactive is no longer a nice-to-have. It's a must-have, and AIOps is a critical requirement. Discovery of infrastructure, relationships, applications, and services across cloud platforms is at the foundation of IT operations and service management. Once you know what you have, AIOps solutions can help you manage it. Cut through the noise and prevent service degradation with AIOps. Its artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advanced analytics capabilities can analyze extremely large data sets, detect anomalies, and automate event correlation. Quickly identify the root cause of problems with AI-enhanced service-centric probable cause analysis, and use service-centric monitoring to generate heat maps and tile views that show the current state of a business service. AIOps and its predictive capabilities can keep pace with changing demands, including intelligent, continuous optimization of Kubernetes, microservices, pods, and container-based applications. It can also optimize service assurance by proactively planning and managing IT resources. And it does all of this while keeping cloud costs to a minimum. Empower operations teams to stay ahead of data and performance requirements with the latest innovations in AIOps from BMC. To learn more, visit us here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's BMC webinar, AIOps in Action, Elevate Your IT Operations. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in this virtual event. You've joined the presentation listening through your computer speaker system by default, and throughout the presentation, you can submit any questions or comments you have by typing them into the questions box of your control panel. We'll be collecting those questions and address them during the Q&A portion at the end. I would now like to introduce your host, Stuart Fleetwood, Director, Digital Service Operations Management. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Karina, and welcome everybody to our second session on AIOps. It is an extremely exciting part of our industry at the moment. It's my pleasure to be able to bring these webinars to you. We'll have a few more on this over the next couple of months, but the focus of this webinar, last time we caught up, we talked about the tooling that's available today, particularly through BMC, so the AIOps technology that we can use in our organizations today. Some of the feedback that we received from that session was, okay, they're the tools, but how are they actually being used? How are organizations today adopting AIOps, and to get under the covers in terms of specifically what are we talking about when we talk about AIOps. So today I have the great pleasure of bringing to you the story of Telstra, a very large telecommunications company based out of Australia, the largest one in Australia, and a very large telco by Asia Pacific standards as well. Talking about the Telstra story today with us is Dave Wilson. Dave, hi.
Mr.
Dave's made a great sacrifice. He's managed to leave his home and go into the office for this webinar, which is something I think, Dave, it's the first time you've been into the office in how
long? Probably a year.
A year, literally 12 months. So I know we're all under different circumstances, and I'm assuming many of us are at home in their home offices looking at this webinar. We've got a great virtual platform which has got a number of features in it. Please use the question and answer facility so that we can continue to connect what we're talking about with your areas of interest. So also assisting me today will be Herb Van Hook, who is from our office of the CTO. He's actually based in the US. Herb's joining us at the late hour of, I think, about 11 o'clock his time. So I want to thank Herb for doing that. Also joining us will be Vishal. Vishal's our lead architect who works extensively with the telco sector and Telstra in particular. Vishal's based with me here in Australia. So Dave, I thought we'd probably just start us off with some context around Telstra, the business. So perhaps if I could, I'd get you to just make a few comments about where Telstra's at and what the business environment is for you.
Sure. It's Stuart. It's not unlike all the other telcos, and probably most businesses these days. Huge disruption. Different players entering the market. In Australia, we've had several years of our government-sponsored consumer broadband and business broadband that's taken some significant revenue from Telstra. We've got our over-the-top providers that we know and love. Mobile's competition is very intense. We don't have the PSTN, the old fixed line phone service, which was highly profitable. And so it's changing there. And then we've got the people changes. We've undergone a multi-year transition to top to bottom agile at scale. So there's a lot of people changes internally. And just the overall velocity is really increased. It's quite exciting.
So Dave, a business under a lot of competitive pressure, a lot of innovation pressure with new entrants coming into the markets, a legacy, if you like, in terms of just the structures and costs that are built into your business. These are many characteristics that lots of organizations face. Dave, would you agree, or do they feel very particular to telcos?
I don't think they feel particular to telcos, but I guess some people would differ. I think everybody's under increased pressure. We don't have the time, the money that we used to, and we don't have the ownership of our market segments like we used to.
So Dave, your role over the last, let's say even the last period, let's say 5 years, you've been working with Telstra, a very large, complex organisation. You're a senior exec there. You've had the charge, you've had to carry forward the innovation, the vision into the business. How has that resonated? Has that been an easy role to play for you? And your ability to connect the technology to the business, has that been a difficult challenge?
Of course, it's a great challenge. The technology in this conversation is the easy bit. It's the people that we probably, as techos, most of us don't spend enough time on. So certainly, there's been some really great uptake. We've learned a lot along the way. I guess if we had it to do over again, we'd tweak a few of our approaches. But I think where we're at now is a recognition that AI and automation are core to the strategy for through 2025 and beyond, and we've really got some intense focus on that. So I don't think the challenge is on people agreeing that it's the right direction, but the devil's in the details.
Great. Well, so here's how we thought we'd spend the time. Just if I could redirect this a little. We've got a very wide audience here, so we've got people coming at it from different angles, and our idea for this session is that everybody gets something out of the session, regardless of what your role is relative to the AI Ops agenda in your company. So the first section we're going to run is around the strategy. So Vishal will lead us through that. Then we're going to talk about the specific operational impacts. Herb's going to walk us through that. We'll have a bit of a poll around now. I'd like to give you guys a sense of where you all sit relative to each other in terms of your AI Ops journey. So we'll run a quick poll on that. And I wanted to also make sure that those technical people amongst us, that we do something, talk specifically about the tooling. David's a senior exec across all of these functions within Telstra. He's actually able to speak at any level. So if you have questions about his experience with this company, please get onto the Q&A sections. We'll have Q&A at the end. We'll also try and address any questions that you have as we go through the session. Now, just before we kick it off, I wanted to just level set us all around what we call AI Ops, what the definition of AI Ops is. There's obviously a lot of ways in which this terminology is being used across the industry. I thought it would be useful for us just to stabilize what we're talking about just in the context of this forum when we talk about AI Ops. And what we're talking about are three basic capabilities coming together: the ability to discover and observe and monitor what's going on in your environments, the ability to actually administer and manage and engage with with the technology, and then finally the ability to actually automate or act on the things that you're observing. And looking at these three capabilities not as separate things, but actually as a combined continuum, and having that ability then to power those capabilities with big data concepts, powerful engines like analytics and machine learning to produce a more intelligent operational environment. So that's what we're calling AI Ops. It's as per Gartner's definition. And without further ado, I'd like to now pass it over to Vishal and kick off the first section. Thanks. Vishal.
Thanks, Stuart. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So we looked at previously, Stuart introduced us to the AI Ops continuum, which is really fueling based on machine learning, big data, and really providing the predictiveness within the environment from observing, engaging, and driving that greater actionability. And it is indeed a journey, so is to deliver unified service experience. So AI Ops, which to really fuel the experience that organizations' ambitions are to deliver internally as well as to the customer. And every good journey looks at delivering value often and fast to their internal stakeholders and to the customers and partners at large. What I've got on the screen is a service continuum. We look at this as a core capabilities from enabling AI Ops vision, and it complements the previous concept that Stuart introduced to us. But without further ado, what I would like to do is we've got Dave on the line, and Dave has been a terrific catalyst at Telstra. We heard a lot about the pressures that the telco industry is generally facing at large, but he's been a terrific catalyst in driving automation with data, specifically applying agile principles and collaborating with the larger DevOps teams. So Dave, can you share with us your approach and journey towards data and automation?
Sure, sure, Vishal, absolutely. I mean, it's very much been a journey. You know, I think back our initial steps deploying Discovery and linking that into CMDB, establishing some foundations, right? And we did that because if you can't see it, you can't manage it, right? So we were very much on the Discovery side of things, and then we deployed automation. Back in the day, they were individual kind of capabilities, and we got great value out of that. By deploying Discovery everywhere, and that's the BMC Discovery product. It's the name changes every few years. I'll just call it Discovery. We learned so much about the environment and the fleet of servers and network devices, and that just it helped us with our understanding security posture. It was a tremendous help on software asset management. In fact, it was such a help in terms of understanding our software estate and how to optimize that we spun off a whole new software asset capability that saved us tens of millions of dollars. I won't tell you the number. It's really big. So where we've come to is getting value along those steps of the way, deploying server automation and network automation, initially focusing on patch management, but then getting into more operational productivity and being able to do things at scale across a fleet of over 200,000 network devices and upwards of 50,000 servers, both on-prem and legacy style as well as cloud. So quite a complex environment. And where we used to also have a focus on IT and a focus on network and kind of very little overlap internally in the organization, that's all changed now. So what we're doing is really spanning all the way from our really telco specific networks through to our more traditional IT space, whether cloud or on-prem, really integrating those capabilities now, so they're not just standalone, they're not silos. Where we're spending a lot of our time now, and I can talk about some of those examples a bit later, is really taking what I'll call observability to the next level. We've got all our log files, for example, going into Splunk. And the power of that is just incredible. Whether it's Splunk or something else, doesn't matter. We've got all of our data relative to problems and incident, all the alarming and event data. All this is going into well, not one place, maybe a couple of places. We get the data all in one place. We're now focused on taking it to the next level. But I guess, you know, we couldn't have, and what I'll share is I think some pretty interesting advanced examples a bit later. The foundations, and it took quite a long time, they can't be shortcut, right? So in our problem management process, for example, in ITIL terminology, you know, it's critical. That process is, you know, probably invented in 1958, as far as I know, long time. But what we do now is talk about data in those contexts, right? So what was the data telling us in advance of an incident, of an outage? What were the indicators? What were the signals? And why didn't our analytics pick up on that before the, you know, the incident? So a lot of our focus is on advanced observability and integrating across all of these different previously siloed capabilities. Lots of learnings. I guess I know we're in the interest of time. We can come back and question and answer later. The greatest challenge, if we had to do over again, was we really need to focus far more on people and the uptake of our automation, because we can build a lot of great capabilities, even with input from all the stakeholder groups, but if they don't use it, ultimately, it's just a waste of time and money. And we did have a few dead ends, but I think right now, with our move to Agile at scale, that's very infrequent that happens, but that was a big learning for me. I'll leave it at that, Vishal, unless you have any questions.
Dave, that was terrific. You shared a lot there, and you actually answered. We've got a question from the audience around what was the largest pain before the transformation, and I think you touched really on working around the people and the process and ensuring that that's really well understood. You touched on some very, very important things, and let's take a moment for a minute. Telstra is a large, complex environment. You touched also on automation portfolio, and you also touched on driving greater productivity around change and impact management. Could you elaborate a little bit more around the sort of outcomes that you've been able to sort of establish as you've gone on this journey around change and impact management through automation and data?
Sure, I'll come at that a couple of different ways. So one of the benefits, quite clearly, is the ability for us to accelerate what we're doing, right? And we deploy change to tens of thousands of network elements overnight now using some of the automation products. Our cybersecurity patch management program has really been accelerated. But when you think about successful change, what does a successful change look like? We really think more end to end. Patch management, deploying a patch is an example, really easy, relatively easy, but it's the end to end that really ensures success, right? So our automation that we've integrated with Orchestrator and some other technologies into the server automation products, for example, it addresses the change management aspects. So raising changes in remedy, making sure they're in approved status before the other automation kicks off, making sure the automation has done health checks of the elements that we're targeting so that we don't apply patches to a device that's not healthy anyway, because that's always going to come to grief. So really knitting together that end to end, I think, is what's enabled our teams to not have failed changes where automation was a result of it, and to allow small teams to do massive amounts of work because they don't have that end-to-end, I'll call it grunt work, but it's a lot of admin around what at the core is a piece of technical work. We have some productivity and customer service improvements as well that we've seen. So, you know, with smarter ticket management, for example. So when something happens, ideally we'd prevent issues, right? But that's not reality. At least what we can do is when something happens and it requires a human, for all the investigation to have been done. So when that human actually has to get involved, they're presented with a complete picture of facts, and they can then much more quickly, whether they're a front of house person taking a call or a technical person back at level 3, that they don't have to go through all that investigation. It's been done for them by automation and some fairly smart automation. We've seen our what we call our first in fix rates. So that's where we're taking a call from somebody that's not happy. Go north of 70%. We're typically, and that's 30% or more higher than previous, simply because we've given a complete set of really understandable facts to somebody that's presented with a complex technical puzzle, let's say. I don't know if that answered exactly your question, Vishal. Have another go.
Look, I think that was fantastic, Dave. You touched on, again, number of core concepts that would resonate with our audience on the call today is around having really good configuration management process, having really good compliance management process, and how the data can truly be a foundational element to drive some of the automation that you've delivered, and they can have similar benefits around security and resilience and the sort of benefits that you're touching on in terms of driving simplification objectives within their organization, and certainly getting closer and closer to that AIOps vision. I have last question, Stuart, if I still have a bit of time. A question is around Dave, really with the proliferation of this emerging technologies, so whether it's cloud, 5G, IoT, I guess you've now got a really good foundational element there, because we know it is very solid. How do you see that actually influencing and helping automation in some of those areas from your perspective?
One thing I've come to realize, well, I've always known this, right? Everybody does automation, whether it's a sysadmin or a network admin. They're doing their own automation and have been for 20 years. So we've had this balance between that great level of democratized automation right across the company, especially the technical pieces of the company, and a central team wanting to automate in a very specific way. And things are moving too quickly, right? So what we're trying to do now is simply provide a set of common and reusable components for people to automate if that meets their needs. But 5G, IoT, I can't keep track of all that stuff. It's happening too quickly. What we're trying to do is give them some base capabilities, the teams that are involved in those areas, that they can extend based on our capabilities. They don't have to reinvent every wheel, but they can develop with our building blocks their own solutions that make sense to them. The other thing I would say there is some of those domains have really good off-the-shelf, leading-edge solutions to do AI ops within a mobile network, for example. We're not going to replace that. That's excellent. What it doesn't do, though, is provide context for the bigger end-to-end. It can say we're having a mobile network problem. Is that because of a fiber cut way over here? There's a whole nother set of automation and systems that watch over that. Really powerful capabilities. So connecting the dots is really important, but we can't keep up and we can't reinvent everything like we maybe used to want to do. The key is on connecting these different groups and their domain-specific solutions so that it makes sense in the bigger context. And I can talk some examples later on that.
Okay, Dave, this is Herb. Listening to you describe your environment the last few minutes, can we perhaps go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And what I'd like to maybe ask you about, there's two things that really resonated with me from what you share with Vishal and the audience. One is really it's impossible for you to scale. You can't really survive without automation, as well as the importance of connecting the automation technology to the process and to the people involved. So what are you seeing in terms of where automation has become most valuable and mapping to the process models that you have in place and the governance around those? And what's been the impact on the people in terms of their acceptance, their leverage of automation? I think we lost Dave a minute. He froze.
Just lost Dave. I don't know how to find him.
I'll ask the question again if he didn't hear me.
We're
Let's give him a moment to come back in.
So Dave's actually come in from his house to the office on the basis that he would have network issues at home. He wanted to reduce the risk of that on inconveniencing the audience. We do apologise. He's clearly had some technical issues. Herb, you might want to, just while we're waiting for Dave, could you extrapolate, aside from Telstra's experience, when you look at the disciplines that companies around the world of similar size and scale have had to really rely on to underpin the sorts of benefits that they've been able to achieve? What do you think are the foundational capabilities?
Well, what we're seeing is something that Dave actually mentioned. This idea that automation is extremely pervasive. We've been doing it for years. However, we're moving into kind of a new phase of what we might call hyper automation. Very pervasive. And what Dave mentioned, the democratization of automation, where you empower people to take that into their own hands. So Dave, welcome back. Can you hear me?
Not yet.
Hello.
Dave,
We can hear you.
Hi,
Yeah,
are you
great.
there?
I am. For some reason, my iPhone rebooted, and that connectivity doesn't work without that.
Well, that's what's going on with a live webinar, not a recorded one. So
sorry about that.
So Dave, I don't know if you heard my question before you dropped off there, but I was asking you really about the impact of automation across your process model and across your governance model at Telstra, and sort of where you've seen kind of the most benefit, and perhaps where you've seen really true acceptance from the staff and pushback from the staff.
Yeah, good one. I look, we've seen some really good acceptance based on the concept of, if the automation does it, it's going to not vary, this time versus next time. Human error is the cause of almost, if you do the analysis, right? Human error is the reason for over 80% of incidents historically. And what we've been able to do with automation is bring repeatability to that process. So that's allowed us to change much more quickly. And so people that care about availability of services, they've really loved what we're doing. And in fact, we have fast paths through change management and other processes because we get guaranteed outcomes. So that's one aspect. Where we get resistance these days, it's because everybody has their own opinion about the right way to do something. It's good-natured resistance, right? And they're all legitimate. But what I guess what I've tried to convey to a lot of folks is, yeah, you've got in your own world some great tools. You've got in your own world over here some great tools. But everybody having their own way to do things means that we're not ever going to be able to stitch the big picture together. And so we'll never get truly better. We'll get incrementally better. And people accept that. It also helps that we've got some processes, financial processes and other, that won't let people do things unless they're compliant and they've got our automation on there. If they don't have our automation, they can't buy software, for example. So that kind of, there's some process guardrails that nudge people in the right direction in a nice way. Yeah, we're not getting active resistance at all. It's not ever, maybe in the old days it was about that, but everybody right now, we're so pressurized. People can't afford not embracing automation, and everybody's embracing it. It's just legitimate differences of opinion on the right way to do stuff. No different than any other company.
So let me follow up with just one last question here before I turn it back to Stuart. Do you have any good methods or good advice to the folks on the webinar on how to measure the impact, the effect, and most importantly, the ROI from automation?
Well, early on, we had to do a lot of business cases, and it was based on ROI and productivity. And it's quite, automation business cases are trivial. We know how much work we do. We know how much time it costs. It has to be measured. And we know what it costs with automation. It's a trivial exercise to justify automation investments. It isn't, it's dirt simple. But where it becomes a little trickier is when we want to spend money on advanced analytics, because we don't have, I mean, it's leading edge. We don't know what we'll be able to achieve. We're going to, put 2 data scientists and 3 data engineers together with some programmers, and we know we're going to do good work, but we're not quite sure how good it's going to be or what it's going to. So to some extent, it's a leap of faith at that bleeding edge level. But luckily, our leaders have seen the journey so far, and they're instinctively supportive. I know that's not a great question, but there's a bit more art in I think the business casing. The more advanced we get and we're breaking new ground than there used to be in the automation where we're turning the crank and we're turning it faster with less people. That was a lot easier.
So what I'm hearing is the business case development for, let's say, labor replacement is pretty straightforward. Do you also incorporate into the business case or the ROI things such as this concept of repeatability that dramatically lowers your risk profile, that perhaps eliminates failure from human error?
Sure. All of that type of business case, if we have proper change and incident and problem management processes, which we do, it's really easy to tally, how many hours of service impact did we have? How much of that was attributed to human error of this flavor or that flavor? So, starting with that base of those really foundational ITIL processes, they're able to produce a really valuable treasure trove of data that we do use to drive business cases, amongst other things.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. Thanks so much for those insights. Stuart, let me pass it back over to you.
Thanks very much, Herb. Dave, what I'm going to do now, we're just going to pause for a second. I'd like the audience just to quickly do a poll. If I could get our poll master just to confirm. Here it is. This is just a quick benchmarking. It's oversimplified, of course, but it may give you just an opportunity to see where you sit relative to this audience here today. So if you could just quickly nominate where you feel your organization is at with their AI ops journey, that'll be great. We'll display the results at some stage. Can I just grab the next slide? What I'm going to do, maybe we'll wait for you guys to do your data entry. The next thing we're going to do is and it's the final section, is to look at the tooling itself. Now, Dave, through his discussion at strategy and process level, has actually talked a lot about the tooling, but I'd like to just show the audience what the tool chain looks like around Dave's business, and get Dave to make some comments about which tools actually generated the most benefits for him in terms of the current status, because not all tools are equal. And then we'll get Dave to make some comments about what he's going to be doing next. So if we could just get on to the next slide. Thank you for your inputs on the poll.
Stuart, just one question that's come through very much backing off Herb's question is, for Dave, is how much time do you think it takes for a tooling capability to start delivering value, Dave? That's a question from audience view.
I think so. Value is really is pretty quick, right? So thinking back if you don't have something automatically discovering your network and your servers and all the elements, the value that you'll get by just doing that alone is quite significant. That's not AI ops. That's just knowing what's in the network, right? And what software is loaded and everything else. Are you in compliance with your software license agreements or not? Or have you over provisioned, under provisioned? So just those really early stages, we got huge value out of. I mean, it was immense. And every step of the way, it's important for us to get value every increment, not, it's a long journey. If we had said, look, we're going to buy all this stuff and we're going to spend all this labor, and 5 years from now, we're going to start getting a return when we get AI ops, it would never have flown, of course. So I think every step of the way gets value. And then it's the integrating the pieces just takes it to another level. And then integrating the data with the automation is that's really where our next step function is. So I don't know I can go into great detail on some of that if we want. I know I'm kind of answering at a high level.
So Thank you, Vishal, for that question. So here's what we call we represent this as a tools chain. It's actually a very similar one to what's being deployed logically at Telstra. I don't intend to take you through the chain. Most people can look at that as you comment, Dave. But you've mentioned a lot about discovery in terms of its capability and what it brought to the organisation. Were there any other parts of the tool suite that really stood out to you as being very powerful and easy to engage with?
So I'll talk about a three-legged stool. One of the legs is discovery in CMDB, knowing the fleet, knowing the configuration, what's out there, who owns it, all this stuff, critical. The other leg is the server automation and network automation products, reaching out and making an understanding about a device, is it compliant or not, and then being able to do action to change its state, to get it compliant, to patch, to change something, to reboot it, whatever. So, and then the magic of Orchestrator to tie that together, I think is really powerful. So once we, for example, what you're looking at here, right? We've got a capability that will do automated change management, waiting before the change is approved, before it kicks off the automated work, and validating then that the change was successful and updating the change ticket. That's what these ingredients do, and that's using Remedy and Discovery and Orchestrator and this TrueSight automation services. We're recently doing some work where our IT teams, our agile teams that are building new stuff, they need to get our cyber people to have a look at what they've done and make sure it's okay. And one of the things that we do is just all the time is we'll do a vulnerability scan. And in this case, I'll talk about running Qualys. Previously, the IT teams would raise a request. Here's my infrastructure. Please scan me. Tell me if it's okay. Well, the cyber team's got a queue of work, right? So it could be a long time before they're able to do that. We've built self-serve capability now, so they raise a request in ServiceNow. Orchestrator picks that up. We go out, figure out if the person's allowed to run a scan, look in Remedy, make sure that's okay, figure out what infrastructure they're talking about. We go out to the infrastructure, we add credentials so Qualys can do a proper job. We go kick off Qualys, we take the results from Qualys, massage them so humans can read them, update the ticket, and we remove the credentials. And now with cyber people not even spending a minute on it, the IT teams have got a readout on whether what they're doing is on track, or do they have vulnerabilities they got to go fix before they're allowed to go live, right? I know that's a lot. I probably talked through that too quickly, but that's the magic just with those three products, right?
So and that's how also you're able to inject into DevOps teams, into agile initiatives and add value rather than being an inhibitor. You're actually able to use automation to help make that easy to deal with.
Absolutely, it's making it easy for smart people to get the outcome, right? And we haven't always been able to do that. But then we take that, just as a quick segue. Now we have some other automation that understands the perimeter, our internet perimeter, and that's always changing. But we'll be able to reuse this capability I just talked about to do proactive scanning of the perimeter, even as it changes in ways we didn't know about. Somebody's put something new that's internet accessible. Well, we can scan it. Nobody knew about it. It's popped up. Is it okay? Let's go figure it out. If there's something wrong, let somebody know by raising a ticket and assigning it to the right group. So it's a lot of reuse, which is the other thing I probably didn't touch on.
Okay, Dave, we've actually got the survey result. Let me quickly show you all where you fit relative to each other. So a large part of the audience with no formal program, very few operating at scale in the context of what we're talking about today. This is not particularly surprising in terms of less people in the higher end orders of adoption. Most are either doing this or in discussions about AIOps, and we can see there's still a reasonable contingent, 40% minority, where there are no formal AIOps programs. Well, that's great. I hope you find find that useful. Dave, just in terms of those survey results, is that your experience as well in terms of a person in an operational role with a network of people in similar roles? Do you feel that the Telstra's position is well ahead of the curve, or do you feel many organisations are out there working with these themes?
Well, firstly, I don't know for sure. My sense internally is, and I've gotten back and forth on this, Stuart, some of our conversations more recently. I kind of have a purist view on where we're heading, and sometimes I measure where we are in an overly negative way. The analogy I'm coming to terms with is we don't need full self-driving cars before we have AI that's helping us, with our transport. And we've moved in Telstra. I think we've moved past MapQuest, where in the old days you'd do something on your computer and you'd print it out and you'd use that as a paper map in the car. We're in Google Maps territory now. We're predicting using the combination of data and our deep knowledge about the infrastructure and the services. We're predicting where we're going to have issues. When people put new stuff on the network, new infrastructure, new services, our CMDB may be out of date. We're now doing dynamic topology discovery. So like in Google Maps, I think we might be leading there, just to use that analogy. We see traffic progressing down here. There's no known road there. Guess what? We're going to define a road, and that's going to be added to the topology. And we're going to measure service quality, even though we don't yet know what that road is. In our mobile network, it's changing so quickly that we can't kind of manually map it out anymore, but we still have to navigate that topology and understand if it's working correctly. So I guess to answer it, right, it's glass half full, glass half empty conversation as to whether we're as advanced as I think we should be, or maybe more advanced than anybody else.
So, Dave, what's your overall future view in terms of these platforms? How do you speak about this and advocate for this? What words do you use to advocate for this in an organisation like Telstra? Where are we heading?
So where we're heading is taking, and most of what I've discussed hasn't been what I would call AI ops. It's a lot of the foundations. I'll give you some examples, maybe, Stuart. Is that okay, or is it, do we want to save those for the tool session?
No, that's all right.
All right. So one of the great challenges is with our national broadband network, right, which is basically taken Telstra out of the the wholesale business for providing consumer broadband, and we're a retailer, and in the middle is another company called NBN Co. And so when our customers call in, or they're unhappy, their service isn't working, not performing, how do we figure out where what the issue is? Is it in Telstra's network? Is it in the customer's premise? Is it at in the NBN Co? So one of our advanced solutions that we've built, basically, where we now have data insight, real time, near real time, about the health of every single consumer service, consumer and business broadband service, every single one, real time. Well, what can you do with that? That sounds like nothing fancy. But we also know our network topology, and we understand a little bit about the NBN topology. We can now, with high degree of certainty, in an automated fashion, say, Herb is seeing broadband degradation. He didn't call us. We know he's seeing it. Stuart is seeing it. They don't live on the same street. They live 3 streets apart, but we know in the network there is a common element, and everybody attached to that common element is having trouble. Oh, by the way, that's not a Telstra element. That's an NBN Co element. We now automatically raise a ticket. We enrich it with all that context, and we send it to NBN for them to fix. We can now update our customers. Some of them subscribe to, this. We can update our service status pages with that. Previously, that would have been multiple handoffs with people being on the phone figuring out what's wrong with their broadband, and now that's automated end to end to a great extent. So to me, that's starting to see what the power of automation and data combined to bring customer service benefits. We improve time to resolve issues, and we save a huge amount of labor internally bopping tickets around for no reason. That's one example. I don't know if you want another
Dave,
one.
that's a good example. As much as that reflects a very telco-specific circumstance, all organisations have third parties involved in their supply chains. All are struggling with how they monitor the handoffs and how they monitor third-party contributors to the service experience, and seeing how you're struggling with that in relation to the national broadband network is a good example of how large enterprises today need to operate. All right. Well, what I'd like to do now, Vishal, we've only got time really for a couple of questions, but I want to make sure the people that have taken the trouble to ask a question get answered. Can I just throw to you and see just a couple of questions? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. We've got some great questions. Probably this is for you, Herb. The question is, what's the role of data lake at large, and does BMC can provide some solutions around for data lakes and machine learning for auto resolution?
Well, it's a good question, very good question. In the context of the area we're talking about here, in the context of how data lakes, big data technologies might be leveraged in the AI ops context, in that solution context. If you think about it, our systems, our networks, our applications are producing more data than ever before. And I know Dave and his team, as all of our customers, are wrestling with massive amounts of log data, massive amounts of metric data, and massive amounts of event data. and so they'd love to see those things correlated along with the change data, along with their asset system of record, along with the service they're delivering, et cetera. So what we're seeing, and where BMC Solutions is evolving, is leveraging, you might think of as data lake technology, to combine those, to normalize that information, to parse it, to enrich it, to make it more valuable in the context of AI ops. And one of the things we've done with the last couple of releases of our monitoring products have been leveraging AI and machine learning to things such as more sophisticated anomaly detection. For example, we've had customers that say, we may be watching for 100 different things, and it's the 101st thing that we're not watching that actually causes the problem. And so how do we know we're watching the right things? Well, a lot of times, even if you aren't monitoring the right particular metric or instrumentation layer, you can tell by a change in the cadence. For example, if suddenly your log data from a device triples, then guess what? You might have a problem there, even if you don't know exactly what it is yet. So we can use things like AI and machine learning to build models and train for that. In fact, the latest version of our Helix Monitor solution ships with 8 out-of-the-box models, which then have to be trained in context with the customer's implementation. So we're leveraging on the detection side, and that then can be helped to drive automation. And so that's where we're really providing a lot of our focus and investment. So that's to give you one example.
Thank you, Herb. That's great. And last question, if we have time, is, the question is around driving greater automation and how does it impact a human element of supervision? And it's more driven towards ongoing training of personnel. Perhaps, Dave, you're nodding, so I'll hand off to you to answer that question.
So I guess I thought where the question was going, and I guess that's what I'm going to answer, is, what we're still pretty nervous about is letting our automation take action based on some black box AI thing, because that in most cases that's a leap that we haven't yet taken. So a lot of our, and I think where the invention, the next period is going to come is figuring out how to truly get past, in some cases anyway, human curated rules about what to be done. We're getting comfortable with some of our advanced analytics and that's highlighting root cause, but we're not yet comfortable with letting that thing take any action, even though we have the capability. So we're kind of wrestling with that one right now.
So Dave, if I might weigh in just a bit on that, we're running into that same challenge when we leverage AI machine learning in our solution set. So what we're trying to approach it as is not only can it provide an outcome or an answer based on the innate logic, but also has to provide a bit of an explanation of how it got there. For example, one of the things we're working on in our innovation lab now is there a way, because so many of our customers have shifted to a continuous delivery model, they've really turned on DevOps in a big way. So is there a way to predict reliability or risk on a DevOps push, on a release, to give some early stage warning? Is this release something we've got to watch more closely, or is it pretty safe? And the things we're using for inputs there, we can look at a lot of criteria and come up with some idea and some prediction model. And it's one thing to say, well, we believe it's going to be 92% okay, but it's another thing to explain why we think that. So whenever we build these algorithms or deep analytics or machine learning models, I think our customers are expecting us to be able to explain, or have the solution explain how it reached that, to provide more confidence in it. Because I do think it actually takes time to get comfortable with those things. That black box model, people are still pretty wary of.
Thank you, Vishal. I'm going to call a wrap on the questions just in terms of timing. Herb, we've got a lot of things that Dave talks about are common to many of our customers. Maybe you could just help us by giving us a slightly broader, finishing us up in terms of a slightly broader perspective, if you could share with us, Herb.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, Stuart. Thanks. And one of the things that BMC does is we think a lot about what IT is going to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now. Right? We want to still be in business. We want to still be providing value to our customers. And we find that there's 5 key technologies that people focus around. And one of those is really pervasive automation. We believe that is going to be a real watchword of the future. And Dave, what you guys have done at Telstra is pretty admirable, and you're well on your way. Even though it's a journey and it's iterative, you're really showing a lot of customers what the art of the possible is there. So it's very impressive what you've done, and I appreciate so much for you sharing that today. In fact, I've got to participate in another webinar here stateside in about a week or two, which is all focused around hyper automation, and that's kind of the new buzzword of the day. It's sort of like anything that can be automated should be automated, type of thing. But it's a complexity of tools that we've got in front of us. You still have to obey the process rules and the governance rules. You can't let things just kind of get out of control there. You just have more chaos. And we're seeing a lot of our customers embrace automation as a way to tackle the explosive scale of their operations, the challenge that the modern cybersecurity world brings, and really to enable a lot of the day in, day out work to be automated away, so our staff, our key people, our smart people can do really more higher value work. And that's a key part of it as well. So we really appreciate your time. And Dave, it's good to see you again. I was there at Telstra a little over a year ago, as we kind of say in the before times when travel was possible. And we, as part of the group that recognized Telstra at the time for all their innovation that they've done within their IT estate. And it's great to see the continuing work you guys are doing there. So thanks so much. Thank you from everyone.
Thank you, Herb. A good note to finish on. I want to thank the audience. We've actually had attendees from many companies across the region. I think we're covering people from New Zealand right through to India. For those of you that had to get up early, I appreciate your attendance. This is the second in our AI Ops series. We'll have a couple more over the next 6 to 8 weeks. It's a very, very interesting topic, but it's also a reality for many organizations today struggling with the requirements of providing increasingly critical services and dealing with the massive amounts of data that is flowing around our environments. Guys, I want to thank our speakers, Vishal, Herb, and absolutely Dave. And thank you to our coordinators. This has been a great session. Thank you. We have a short video.